I'm Lori Zimmerman, Director of Professional Learning with MASA, and I am really excited to welcome you to our topic of conversation today. So, Safe at Home is a project that I had the opportunity to work with in a previous lifetime, and we are excited to welcome Austin and Stephanie. Is Stephanie on here today? We'll let Austin start. I'll turn it over to you and you can introduce yourself. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will help monitor that while we're talking today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Austin Agard. I'm the communications supervisor here at Safe at Home. And essentially what that means, because I know communications is such a broad topic that sometimes the question is, okay, what form of communications do you supervise? And my team covers a wide variety. So we do things like this where we do presentations, maybe we provide general education. Sometimes that means that we're just making phone calls. And then sometimes that means that my team is the first person that you might speak to when you call into our office. We are the first line on the phones, so we answer them. And then if need be, we might transfer you to somebody who might be a little bit more expert than us. So that's the general overview of what I supervise. But then I do have two people from my team on today. One is Stephanie, and then the other is Cindy. So Stephanie is our communications coordinator, and I will let her introduce herself. And then Cindy, who's also on, she is one of our student record transfer experts. And so she will be on with us today as well. So I'll go ahead and let Stephanie introduce herself.
Hey, again, I'm Stephanie Fouth, part of the communications team. I mostly support the more visual and I guess techie things, doing website, helping put together newsletters, helping with presentations. So that's where I fall in addition to supporting all other tasks, as Austin mentioned.
Yep. And then I don't know if Cindy's in a place where she can introduce herself, but if she would like to, then I'll open the floor for that. However, I'm not sure if technology is working on her side today. So let's see. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and get started today. Let me click the next button if it will cooperate. Okay, so before we get started, I would like to go ahead and just walk through some of the things that are and are not true about Safe at Home. So first and foremost, we are not an advocacy program, and I'm going to add to this today to say that we are also not mandatory reporters. Something that is true is that we are a division of the Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State, so we fall under that umbrella, and we have our own division. We are not a resource to find housing, but we are a tool for people with extreme safety needs. We also don't provide a fake address. Our address is very real. We go and we touch it every single day. It's something that we interact with. It's a very real address. But we do issue a special address that others are required to accept as a person's legal address. We are not a witness protection program. I know sometimes it can be really difficult to describe what Safe at Home is when you're trying to advocate for yourself. So sometimes people might try to describe us as Minnesota's witness protection program, which is not accurate. We are not accustomed to being a witness protection program. However, we are a division that provides an address confidentiality service. So some of the things that rule us in this office are the laws that we are governed by. One of which is Minnesota Statute Chapter 5B, Section 13.045. And then we also have our administrative rules, Chapter 8290. So both of these rules together have a lot of really great information. So not everybody really likes to read through the rules or laws. So we will talk through a lot of the meat and potatoes that are in these rules and laws or statutes and rules. But if you'd like to read it, this is what you can read. So when we're talking about who's in Safe at Home, which we will get to in a moment, but right now we have over 5,300 current active participants. And those current active participants fall within 2,500 households. And then we also have application assistants who volunteer to help us with our application process. We currently have more than 370 active application assistants across 160 partner locations. We do serve every county in the state of Minnesota and two tribal nations. So when we're talking about how many people we serve, that's great, but who do we serve within the amount of people that we do serve? So people can join Safe at Home for a wide variety of reasons, but some of the top reasons do include what we have listed here on the screen. So the most common reason that we see people join Safe at Home is they are survivors of domestic violence. We also see survivors of sexual assault. We see survivors of stalking, and then we also see a large percentage of people joining, or more commonly, we are seeing people joining Safe at Home for professional reasons. So essentially, that would be a doctor, attorney, therapist. That might be somebody on judicial staff. That could also include people that are law enforcement or other services, or they provide services where they don't really want anybody to know where they actually reside. So in order to be eligible for Safe at Home, you have to meet three main criteria. So the first is that you must be a resident of Minnesota or become a resident of Minnesota within 60 days of enrollment. You also must fear for your safety or reside with somebody who does fear for their safety. We do not require that someone provide proof that they fear for their safety. We only require that they verbally confirm that they fear for their safety. So that could be somebody that truly fears for their safety, or more frequently referred to as a secondary victim, could be somebody who lives with someone who does fear for their safety. So this could be a roommate, this could be a mom, a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, or a spouse. And then you must not be required to register as a predatory offender. And the reason for that is because if you are required to register as a predatory offender, then that means that you are required to maintain a public address, which means that you cannot maintain a confidential address. Therefore, you are not eligible to be a Safe at Home participant. So, how does Safe at Home work? We'll get into this. So Safe at Home, as I had stated before, we do issue an alternate address that the person can use as their work, home, or their school address. This can also be used for business purposes. So we do have people that are business owners, and they can use their Safe at Home assigned PO box for business reasons as well. So additionally to that, once somebody has been issued their alternate address, that becomes their new legal address that by law, all public and private entities in the state of Minnesota must accept as the Safe at Home participants address for all reasons. So now that they've been issued their Safe at Home assigned PO box, all entities, both private and public in the state of Minnesota, must accept that as their legal address. So Minnesota is pretty unique in this aspect because all address confidentiality services or programs are different state by state because they are state programs. So these are state laws that we are governed by. And so with that being said, some states don't extend to the private sector. They only extend to the public sector. Some states only assist with voting. And so Minnesota is really lucky to be so robust and be able to extend to both public and private sectors. But other states, not all states do. However, there are quite a few states that also extend to the private sectors in different ways. So this alternate address that we've been talking about, typically it will always, or typically once somebody's enrolled in Safe at Home and then they are assigned their PO box, they are also assigned something that we call a lot number, and this is a unique identifier. So all participants share the same PO box. So the PO box that you see at the bottom of the screen, that is PO Box 17370, all participants will share that same PO box, and then they'll be provided their own unique identifier that we call a lot number. So all participants will also receive their own lot number. And you can see that this is the format that this will be delivered to them in. And this is typically how they will tell you what their address is that they'll give you that lot number, the PO box, and then it is always in St. Paul, which is this slide. I got ahead of myself. I apologize for that. But a participant's address is always the PO box that is in St. Paul, no matter where they live in their state or within the state. So if they live in Duluth, they will not have a PO box that is a Duluth address. They will always have the St. Paul PO box. So sometimes we have participants that might live in St. Paul and they'll get the St. Paul PO box. But oftentimes participants are not living in St. Paul. More often than not, they don't live in St. Paul, and we do not assign them a PO box that shows what city they would live in. All participants receive the St. Paul PO box. So in order to apply for Safe at Home, an eligible person has to meet with an application assistant so that they can do a few different things, because the application assistant not only helps people with the application process for Safe at Home, but they are often advocates that work at community-based organizations or some of those partnering locations that we were talking about earlier. And so being an advocate or working with community-based organizations, they also help people with resources. They are also required to do safety planning. So when they meet with an application assistant, the biggest thing that they should be focusing on is their safety plan, because it is up to the application assistant to determine not only eligibility, but whether or not Safe at Home would be an effective part of a person's safety strategy. So if somebody can't use Safe at Home effectively, or if they are not in a situation where Safe at Home would be effective for them, the application assistant does have the discretion to determine that they would not be able to apply from that point forward. But if somebody needs to apply, typically they can contact our office first, and then we would be able to have some of those conversations with them as well. If you're referring somebody, or if somebody that you're talking to may seem as if they would be a good candidate for Safe at Home, you can always have them contact our office so that we can talk through enrollment with them. Or you can find a list of these community-based partners on our website under the Enroll in Safe at Home tab. And then the counties, there's a drop-down menu of counties, and then you can see all of the people in that county that have application assistants that serve the county. So once somebody's met with an application assistant and they have performed safety planning and it's been determined that they are eligible and that they will be able to effectively use Safe at Home, then they would fill out the application that gets sent into our office. And from that point forward, we would call them and perform an intake call. So this intake call is typically really productive in the way that we go into depth about what it means to be a Safe at Home participant. So we go over what they need to know now. We make sure that their application is complete and correct. And then once they have been certified, so that means they've performed the intake call and we've determined that their application is complete and correct, then we mail them a resource packet that has a lot of information. Typically, the amount of information is pretty overwhelming, and so it can be a lot to take in. However, we do make a couple of phone calls afterwards to make sure that they did receive the resource packet and that they are able to read through it. We make sure that they know what the highlights are, some of the things that they need to do up front. So we walk them through the entire process through the phone. But in that resource packet is participation cards. So all participants will receive a participation card. That means everyone from infancy through adulthood will receive their own participation card. It will include their name, their lot number, and then of course the PO box. And this is a form of identification in the way that this provides proof that they have enrolled in Safe at Home. Now, they are not required by law to carry this on them as they would an identification or a driver's license. However, a lot of our participants have learned that it's easier to maneuver within the world if they have this on them, because a lot of banks in their policies will require that they show their participation card in order to withdraw money or do any kinds of transactions, or if they get pulled over, they would need to show their participation card in that circumstance as well. So a lot of participants just carry it on them out of habit. So we might provide them the proof that they have enrolled in Safe at Home with that participation card. However, people come and go from this program every single day. So a status change can happen pretty quickly. And when we say a status change, what we are referring to is somebody either entering or exiting the program. So the most common reason that people will exit Safe at Home is through cancellation. So Safe at Home is required by law to have a participant's real address where they reside, their legal name, and a way to contact them via telephone. So we do not require that people own a telephone, especially people in situations where they might not feel safe. It might not actually be safe for them to have a telephone, but we do require that they have a way that they can be reached. Sometimes that's their work number, sometimes it's a neighbor or a cousin or somebody that they regularly speak to, like a sister or a friend. So one of the most common ways that people get canceled is by not keeping us updated with the required information. So sometimes that might be in the form of receiving undeliverable mail, where essentially what that means is that we have tried to send mail to a participant and then it has been returned to our office. And that typically signifies that a person has moved. So then if they are not able to update us, or if they don't update us with their address, then they will be canceled. Sometimes whenever we receive undeliverable mail, or sometimes we might just need to contact a participant through the telephone and we learn that their telephone has been disconnected. They will be canceled if they do not update us with their phone number. And then same for their legal name. If they receive a driver's license or a social security card through the mail and it is not the name that we have on file and they don't update us with their new legal name, then they can be canceled for that reason as well. Another reason that people exit the program is through withdrawal. And typically we consider this a positive thing because that usually means that someone no longer fears for their safety. So being a Safe at Home participant is totally voluntary. You can exit whenever you would like through withdrawal. And so a lot of the times people do when they no longer feel that they fear for their safety. So it looks like we do have a question in the chat, but I cannot see it because it wants me to exit out of my screen that I'm sharing. Is there a way that somebody would be able to read that to me?
I don't see a question, Austin. I see
Okay.
Dave is just welcoming folks there. Oh,
Oh,
now I see a question.
perfect.
How many people in Minnesota are presently Safe at Home participants?
So all of our participants are residents of Minnesota because it is one of the eligibility requirements. And if somebody were to leave the state of Minnesota, they would no longer be a resident, which would mean that they are no longer eligible. So all of our current active participants, which is more than 5,300 current active participants, are all residents of Minnesota.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now we've talked through a little bit about some of the reasons that people are no longer in Safe at Home. And we've also talked about how, people have that verification that they've enrolled by having a participant card, but how do you know if they're actually a current active participant? And so with that being said, we have a verification process. So if you are interacting with somebody who you believe is a Safe at Home participant, as long as you have their full name and their lot number, or their full name and their date of birth, we can verify whether or not they are an active participant at the time that you call. So a person's name and their lot number is considered public data, and so we are able to use that information to verify whether or not they're an active participant. I know sometimes they might say that they are a Safe at Home participant, but they might not provide a lot number in that time. I know, especially when you're enrolling someone in school, There's a lot of information that's being talked about. There's a lot of forms to fill out. So sometimes they just put the lot number and they forget to put, or they put the PO box and forget to put the lot number. If you need to verify the lot number, you can do that as long as you have their full name and date of birth. However, we can't do it in reverse. So if you have their name and lot number and need verification of date of birth, we cannot provide that. However, we can provide their lot number. So when we're talking about private data, specifically surrounding the private data that we have in our office, aside from their name and their lot number, all other information in the Safe at Home office is considered private data. So that's their actual address, their telephone number. We cannot talk about them and any of their situation, their life circumstance. We cannot confirm whether or not they've called in. So we can't have any of those conversations at all. So once somebody's been enrolled in Safe at Home, all interactions with Safe at Home staff members are also considered private data. Now, the way that we house this private data is actually quite interesting. So we have what is called an air-gapped network, which essentially means that we have an entire software system that has never been connected to the internet, and it is entirely separate from the internet. So it can only be accessed by people who are Safe at Home staff members in the Safe at Home office, and it's a really secure system. So we have a lot of private data and we take security very serious. So here's a list, and it's not even a comprehensive list. This is actually quite a short list for all of the places that are required to accept a Safe at Home assigned address or Safe at Home assigned PO box address specifically. And you'll see here that one of those places is actually school enrollment. When people need county-based services are also required to accept a Safe at Home assigned PO box. Same with a driver's license. So if someone is effectively using Safe at Home, their driver's license or state ID card should reflect their Safe at Home assigned PO box and lot number. So if you were to be looking at someone's ID, it should reflect that they are a Safe at Home participant by their PO box and lot number. And another way that we are another place that is required to accept a Safe at Home assigned PO box is through service of process and the court system. So before we move on to the mail process, do we have any questions about Safe at Home overall? All right. So then we'll move on.
Looking good, Austin.
Perfect. So if someone is effectively using Safe at Home, then their public address should be the Safe at Home assigned PO box address and their lot number. So if you were to Google someone who is effectively using Safe at Home, then you would see that it would be their name and then it would be a lot number and a PO box listed and not their true physical address, as it would be if we were to maybe try to Google ourselves. And one of the ways that we are able to help people maintain a confidential address to this degree is by providing a mail forwarding service. So what we say when we have a mail forwarding service is that somebody, or such as yourselves, the sender, will mail something to a Safe at Home participant's Safe at Home assigned PO box, and then that gets sent to our office, where we then process the mail, and then we forward the mail to the participant. So what this does is that this removes you from having to know their real address, and we become the mailing agent for the service, or we become the mailing service for the participants. I don't know why that was so hard to say. And then we're the only ones that will know the address or the true address of a Safe at Home assigned or of a Safe at Home participant. And then we are the only ones that would be forwarding mail to their home. So what we mean when we say mail processing is that we will sort through the mail because we only forward first class mail. Typically, our participants are really excited about this feature because that means that they are no longer getting marketing mail or junk mail. So we weed some of that out for them, and it usually never even makes it to them. Sometimes people will send some of their marketing materials through first class mail. So sometimes things slip through, but most of the junk mail or the periodicals are pulled out. So we only forward first class mail and we do not forward packages. There are two exceptions to forwarding packages. One is that we will forward packages from a federal, state, or county agency. And then the exception two is non-refrigerated pharmaceuticals. So we will send prescriptions as long as they are not requiring a refrigeration service. Do we have any questions before I get to the next slide? Because typically the packages get a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure that we're going through this.
None so far.
Perfect. So service of process. As I had mentioned before, the courts are required to accept a safe at home participant's safe at home assigned PO box. I know I say that a lot. And so I'm going to try to limit that because I'm sure that it's getting to be a mouthful for everybody to hear. But the Office of the Minnesota Secretary of State is a participant's agent to receive mail, and we're also the agent to receive service of process. So essentially what that means is that if someone needs to serve a participant, they serve our office, and it is the same as if they were to serve a participant directly. So we can receive service either through the mail or we can receive personal service, which is just in-person service of process. So what applies to the school system? So when we're talking about schools, I know the biggest question is how do we determine the person's school district? So a participant can only be required to verbally disclose what district that they live in. So during the school enrollment process, the family will verbally disclose the district where they truly reside. And so essentially what this means is that if somebody comes in and says, I need to apply to, or I need to enroll in this school, I have, a kid that lives in this district, then you are required to accept that verbal confirmation that they live in that district as the determination that that is their school district. So student record transfers. One of the services that we provide to safe at home participants is a student record transfer. There's a lot of safety concerns when we're talking about a person who they might fear is the other person's or the other parent. So essentially, if you were to traditionally, there's two pathways here. So the first pathway is in red, and that is the traditional student record transfer pathway. The second is in green, and that is the safe way that participants will transfer student records. So a parent who is feared will go to the school and ask for an inquiry, or they'll ask for the student records to be revealed to them. And then if somebody were to just traditionally transfer their student records, meaning that it went from school to school, then the student records would reflect what school had received the student records. So now the person that they fear, who might be the other parent, will know where that child goes to school, and ultimately now their location has been compromised. But if somebody is a safe at home participant and we facilitate their record transfer, then the parent will go to the old school and ask for them to reveal the student records or give them the student records. And as per the federal law, you do have to provide that. So as long as there's, I'm sure everybody in this room knows FERPA well enough, more than I do, I'm sure. But as for FERPA, you have to give that to the person as long as they have parental rights. So if a parent who is feared goes to the old school and asks for that, then the student records would reveal that they were sent to safe at home. So our office now becomes the conduit that stops that person from learning of the family's new location. And so that paper trail is just effectively broken by using safe at home for the student record transfers. So when we're also talking about student record transfers, this also goes for a couple of different things. There's a couple of layers here. So When we're talking about sending the student records in the non-traditional way through Safe at Home, which means that the record is broken, if you are the old school and you know of the new school and you're able to not retain that information, that would be the safest thing to do for the Safe at Home participant. Sometimes kids can get excited and they can say, oh, I'm going to this new school. And sometimes that information can be retained through comments or through databases. And then that will ultimately end up on a student record. And so there's been times where the new location has still been disclosed, even though they used the student record transfers, because the old school had retained information that might have just been shared out in the open or to a group or informally revealed to the old school. So if possible, the best case scenario would be to not retain that information. So I know that we just kind of talked about that a little bit, but it's also best to not or to avoid situations that could lead to them disclosing information about the new school as well. So when we're talking about, students getting excited, that kind of stuff happens all the time. And students are typically pretty excited to share with their teachers the new school that they might be going to. And most teachers aren't writing that down and immediately putting that as a comment in a database anywhere. Most teachers just kind of lightly take that. However, some of that information can be quite prolifically shared throughout the school, and then it can just become common knowledge that ultimately gets retained. So it's best to try to avoid situations that could lead to that information being revealed in the first place. If you do somehow learn of the new district, try not to act on that information to the best of your ability. I know that there are some places and there are certain situations where there are laws that you're governed by. And so that's a little bit different. But if you're talking to the new parent and the new parent is asking questions and it slips, or they send a text or an email, I don't know why they would be texting, but they send an email and that email somehow contains information about the new school. If you're able to not act on that, meaning if you have a policy that requires that once somebody knows of a new school, they automatically request those records or send those records, because that can go both ways. Sometimes schools' policies are to automatically request the information. So if you're the new school, the best practice would be to try not to automatically request that information from the old school. So to the best of your ability, try not to communicate with the other school, whether you are the old school or the new school. So school transportation. There's a couple of things that we advise our participants to do, but the top thing that we advise them to do, or the number one thing that we our go-to, is to avoid having a bus stop that is directly in front of their home. And the reason for that is that if there is a situation where the new school is learned of, or in the student record process, they learn of the transportation, what's going on with transportation. So transportation is often in student records. And so if that is what is provided to the person that they fear, and the person that they fear has now learned of their transportation habits, and that or their transportation route, or how the bus system is working for their student. If that bus stop is in front of the home of the participant, then that will lead to the discovery of their new address. So we highly encourage that they not do that. So one of the things that we typically encourage them to do is to sit down with transportation upon enrollment and then choose a bus stop that is not in front of their home, but near their home. So a lot of the times what happens is that the transportation office will just show them the map and then ask them, where is the closest bus stop that fits that description. Now, when we're talking about families with students who have IEPs, oftentimes IEPs require a bus stop be in front of the home. So if there's a situation where you're working with a student who has an IEP, we do have processes to help our participants through that. And so it's pretty important that they contact our office to have those conversations. And then we can help coach them through the process, because we have forms that we provide, and it's there's a lot of layers to that. But as a whole, it's pretty important that you encourage families to contact our office in general when they have any kind of transportation or school records concerns. So if you were to have a question, we can only provide general information. We cannot discuss the participant or any of the data that would be surrounding the participant. So again, anything that we have in our office that is pertaining to a specific participant is considered private data. So if you have questions that would ultimately lead to us having to ask questions about private data, we cannot have those conversations with you, but we can have those conversations with the person who owns that private data, which would be the participant. So in these situations where you have questions or you need more information, it's always best to have them contact our office so we can work through some of that. So, a notice to government entity. When we're talking about the forms that we provide to people who might need an IEP service, then some of those things might be government or private entity forms. If you receive a notice to government entity, that means that you have required that a person disclose their address. Once you receive a notice to government entity, that puts that person's information in a different classification than all of the other information that you have in your building. Receiving a notice to government entity does require that you take action. So if you do receive a notice to government entity, which should be pretty rare, but if you receive a notice to government entity, it's really important that you contact our office so we can help you navigate some of the ways that that information is now classified as a different data classification.
Austin, we have a quick question here.
Mhm.
Is there anything within Safe at Home that limits the other parent's ability to receive info from a current school? So you talked about breaking the path so they can't find it from the old school, but the person is asking if a parent who is identified as the parent.
Hello, did I freeze?
Are you able to hear Austin? Stephanie, I think your sound is cutting out.
I see I have unstable network. I'm so sorry. Essentially, they're asking if a parent is listed on the records, identifies themselves, and asks if the student attends there. They must say yes according to the laws they are governed by. Is there anything within Save at Home that changes that?
Unfortunately, no, that's why we have the student record transfer process. So the student record transfer process is to try to help them sever that paper trail to not learn of the new school in general. But FERPA laws are pretty robust. So if somebody retains their parental rights, then you would need to abide by FERPA. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So student directory information. We do instruct the Safe at Home participant to opt out of student directory information. Student directory information can disclose the participants at the student's location and actually lead to the discovery of the participant's new location. Um, we're very aware that a lot of the times when we're talking about student directory information, the automatic process is that they are just automatically opted in. It's typically in a lot of the enrollment materials, and so we do tell participants that it is their responsibility to opt out of student directory information. One of the ways that this can lead to somebody's discovery, because this is usually a question, but if somebody is not opting out of the student directory information, and their student makes the honor roll, or there are some schools that publicly post the student directory information online, or if there's any directory that could make it to some sort of social media platform or the newspaper, then all of that information becomes pretty easily Googleable. And so if somebody is trying to actively find a person and where they live, they're typically regularly Googling that person. So anytime that that information gets released, their new school is now been disclosed publicly online. And so it becomes very easy to just Google and figure out where that person is going to school. So, participation reasons. As I had stated before, people can enroll in Safe at Home for a wide variety of reasons. The important thing to know from this slide is that you are not allowed to require that they share the reason that they are in Safe at Home. So if you are speaking or interacting with a participant, you cannot require that they disclose why they are in Safe at Home. That is considered public or private data, not public data, and so they cannot be required to disclose that information in particular. And I know that they haven't updated these stats since 2023, so bear with me whenever we're talking about this statistic. But in 2023, 61 million women and 53 million men had experienced domestic violence. And so the reason that we include this statistic is that we obviously are not covering more than 61 million women and 53 million men who have experienced domestic violence nationwide. So there is a very small percentage of that national statistic that has enrolled in the Minnesota Safe at Home program. And so when we're talking about people who are joining for domestic violence reasons, they are more likely to not be found because they have enrolled in Safe at Home. And so a lot of the concerns that people have when they are asking for someone to disclose the reason that they joined Safe at Home in the first place, is that they want to know whether or not they can feel safe around that participant. And when you look at it from a simple fact of the matter, you're more likely to be more safe with someone that is actively trying not to be found than someone who is not protecting themselves from being found. So that's just one thing to put out there. And then the next slide that we'll talk about this a little bit as well. It's not been disclosed to us that anybody in this room has been a problem, but we are very aware that gossip is something that commonly occurs in school systems, and it's something that is reported to us from a participant level. So our participants have disclosed to us numerous times over the years that they have felt uncomfortable about the gossip that has occurred because they are a Safe at Home participant. Typically, when that is disclosed to our office, it is because they are trying to help or get access, or they are trying to have us coach them to advocate for themselves because the gossip has caused some sort of discomfort or it's caused some sort of additional barrier in their circumstance. And when we're talking about Safe at Home participants, some of our participants have been in for over a decade. We started, Safe at Home started in 2007. And so there are participants that could have joined anywhere between 2007 to this year. So we do have participants that have been in for quite some time. And really, it's been Safe at Home that has helped them provide stability. So asking them questions or having conversations, whispering about them being safe at home, or somehow stigmatizing it can actually be really re-traumatizing for them, considering that they have been in for a really long time. They've found stability. And there are circumstances where people have joined Safe at Home, and it's been so long since they joined Safe at Home that their children don't really understand why they're in Safe at Home. They just know that they're in Safe at Home. So sometimes the gossip that can stem from that can actually be more harmful for the child who isn't very aware of the reason for being in Safe at Home. And then some of our participants are really, they're looking for a new start and they're trying to find security. So some of the circumstances where people talk about them or share this information, sometimes teachers are trying to be helpful. And so they might inform other teachers that somebody's a Safe at Home participant, and they're not really sharing it in a way that is an effective communication strategy for communicating that information. So then it can come across as gossip, even when people are trying to be helpful. So, we know that it's not always gossip. We know that sometimes participants don't get all of the information by the time it's made it to them. But when it is reported to us, it is typically reported to us in a way that has already caused harm to participants. So, from this conversation, if you've learned nothing, I hope that you have learned two things: that schools must accept a participant's Safe at Home address, and Safe at Home cannot disclose any information about the participant's location. So when we're talking about not being able to share information about the participant's location, really what's important to talk about when we're having this conversation, it more so surrounds transportation. Oftentimes we have those conversations or those requests coming from transportation offices who are having a really hard time figuring out transportation needs with the participant without them disclosing their information or their true location. So that's the important part to know when we're discussing not being able to disclose the participant's location. Transportation, because you are talking about location data, can be kind of difficult to navigate. So if you are having a difficulty navigating that, it's really important for the participant to contact our office so we can have those conversations and help them advocate for themselves. Okay. So, any questions? I know I covered a lot of information and I'm sure it was coming out really choppy. I kept getting notifications that I had poor internet, so I'm really sorry about that today. Sometimes our office has the best internet that I've used. Sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate at all. So I apologize if there was any disruption in that.
No disruption on my end, Austin.
Okay.
But we do have another question in the chat, and please feel free to continue to add them or to come off mute and ask them yourself. So Emily is asking about when a family enrolls in a school, is it the family's responsibility to make sure they are enrolling in the correct district or school boundary?
Yes. So when people enroll, we do inform them of the school district that they reside in because the boundaries of school districts can be quite confusing for people. So we do inform them of the district that they live in. And so that is where they get that information from. However, it is their responsibility to disclose that they live in the district that they are applying for or enrolling in, I should say.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
Other questions from our participants or experiences that you've had? I know for me, it was to be able to call and get that verification. It was, you know, fortunately or not, I guess we don't often deal with these kinds of issues. And so having somebody to call and confirm the location was really helpful.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Is there a specific contact that buildings should be working with for a student records transfer?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. However, pretty much anyone in our office can help facilitate them. We do have two people that do most of the student record transfers, and one of them is Cindy, and then another one is Jennifer. And so those are typically the people that you'll talk to. Sometimes, if it's complicated enough, you'll even be talking to me. So if you have questions regarding student record transfers, or if you've received a student record transfer request, or we have sent you student record transfers and you have questions about them, feel free to call us and then we will connect you with one of those three people. Additionally, once you have received a request for student record transfers, you do have 10 days to respond per the law. And so you'll hear from us after 10 days if we have not heard from you. So oftentimes you'll hear from one of the three of us if there is some sort of question or concern.
Great. And Dave did put your contact information in the chat, and I know he will share it with the slide deck too. So we so appreciate you making time to be here today and to share information with us so that we can both be compliant with the expectations and be supportive of students and families.
Absolutely. So before I let you guys go, this is our contact information on this last slide. I will say that if you are trying to direct somebody to our office, please only provide our phone number. We do not email private data. So if someone has questions about their participation or enrollment, we will not be able to respond to them through email. They have to contact our office via telephone. So if you're referring somebody to Safe at Home, then you should give them the phone number. If you have questions, you can call us, but then specifically because we can really only discuss general information, you can ask questions through email, so you can email us any of your questions. And our hours are also listed for each. We monitor the phones from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. we monitor the email 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we are on the email a little bit longer. Okay. Any final questions before we end our session for today? Or before I turn you back over to Lori?
I think we look good, Austin.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We wish you a very happy, warm day before the snow comes.
Perfect. Yeah, I hope that you guys also enjoy the last little bit of warmth that we have.
All right. Thanks, everybody.